Choosing a target market for your book, choosing your ideal reader, can be really difficult because essentially most authors want their book to appeal to everybody, and it's pretty reasonable, really. You want your book to appeal to as wide an audience as you can, and a well-written book will appeal to a lot of people. But if you try to write your book to appeal to everybody, that's a really hard thing to do, and trying to appeal to everybody all at once can leave your writing pretty generic. It can sound a bit soulless. So if we want everyone to pick up the book and we want everyone to love it, but that's not really possible. That's just too broad. And so we need to find out how to write the book really well for the right people. And writing really is a conversation, and we have conversations differently with different kinds of people. For instance, if you're in a conversation with a 20-year-old woman who lives a city lifestyle, or if you were in a conversation with a man in his 60s who is a farmer, you'd have slightly different conversations. Those two people are in my family, so I know that's true. Even if the conversation was about the same thing, you would have those conversations slightly differently with those two people. If your underlying message was essentially the same, you'd talk slightly differently. Your examples would be slightly different. The tone of voice would be slightly different. When you're in the room with somebody having that conversation, you do that subconsciously because you can pick up on who it is that you're talking to. You know who they are. You change your language and your tone and your examples, your case studies, I guess. You change those without really thinking because you can see who you're talking to. But with a book, you don't have that feedback. You don't have that person there, and you're having a conversation with somebody you can't see. So it does make it really hard, and that's why we have to go about things slightly differently when you're writing a book. So say you're writing a book on budgeting, and you have two different readers. You've got your 20-year-old woman and you've got your 60-year-old farmer. And really, budgeting advice might be pretty much the same for both of those readers. But if you try to write it for both those readers at the same time, it sort of could fall a bit awkwardly in the middle. And if you tried to give the same kind of advice to both of them, and your 20-year-old woman might come out of reading your book on budgeting feeling like you didn't really understand what it was like to have just moved out of home for the first time, and your 60-year-old farmer might feel a little bit bamboozled being advised not to use Afterpay too often to buy new clothes because they might have gone off season before you'd paid them off. So you can see that although your budgeting advice might really be very sound and might be the same advice for both those people, you'd need to present it a little bit differently for both of them. So you might need, two different kinds of books with the same information for the two different markets. So knowing which of those two people that you're speaking to will actually help you write your book better. So picking somebody to be your reader actually helps you write much more clearly. And once you know who you're speaking to, your language flows much more easily, and you can chat to them as if they're in the room. Once you know that you're talking to a 20-year-old woman, you can talk about things in a way that you would if there was a 20-year-old woman in the room with you. And when if you're self-editing, you can ask your reader, is this what you want to hear about, or is this not really of your interest? Do you already know about this stuff? Should I leave this in the book? Let's ask my ideal reader. She will tell me if she's interested in this. She'll tell me if she already knows this information or if this is something that she wants to learn about, or if it's too technical or if it's too shallow. So you can always go back to your ideal reader then, and because you'll know them then. Once you go into who your ideal reader is and you find out what they're interested in, how much they know about your subject, what sort of a lifestyle they have, what their interests are, you'll know a bit more about what they want from you as a writer and how much they want to know about your subject. And that can be whatever you say. It doesn't need to be a how-to book. Whatever you're talking about, if you're in conversation with an actual person, you know how much conversation to have because you know who you're talking to and how much detail to go into about it. So isn't it interesting that even though at the beginning of going into this target market or ideal reader or avatar conversation, most authors are quite rightly, they're worried that if we narrow down that readership to a certain person, we think, no one's going to want to read my book except for this one person that I'm writing it to. But it actually allows your writing to flow in a more authentic way and your conversation to be much more realistic and less awkward trying to say everything to everybody. And your writing becomes so much easier to read that it actually opens up your readership because your writing is it's just so much better quality because you're really having a conversation and people can really feel your personality and they feel like they're in the room with you. They don't feel like you're trying to do an advert that's reaching everybody. They feel like they're really in conversation. So this ideal reader stuff, it really does work.